happens when someone who's seen every angle of the insurance business, agent, executive, marketer, even a regulator whisperer, decides to walk away from it all and build something better? And what if that someone is also a 12-year cancer survivor with a hard-won perspective on life, leadership, and doing the right thing, even when it's not easy? Well, today on Professor Leads, I'm joined by somebody who has lived that journey. Chris Michelson, an agency builder, the former CRO of Quote.com, a board member of the Insurance Marketing Coalition, the chief strategy officer at Caryn Health, and a man who believes that success should not be measured in commissions, but rather in character. Today, we're going to go deep on ethics in ACA and Medicare marketing, what it means to lead with purpose, and how a second chance at life shaped one of the most thoughtful voices in the business. Let's get into it. Welcome, Chris.
That was a hell of an introduction. I appreciate that, right? It has been a journey, man. When you put it into context like that, the amount of memories that it spurs up along the years is incredible. Thank you. Thank you for that welcome. That was really nice.
You've lived it and you've earned it. So I saw on LinkedIn earlier this year that you have stepped back from traditional insurance to build a new product line that avoids the usual regulatory constraints and the misleading ads of ACA and Medicare. You wrote in that post that the industry had been, quote, overrun by fraud, misleading information, and taking advantage of consumers and agents alike. So first question, what drove you to make that big shift? And how does this new approach work differently to put clients first?
What drove me? Well, the funny answer is I say this a lot, is all of this gray hair is my children and my wife, and all of this gray hair is everything that's gone on in our industry over the last 5 years. It's a lot. You know, I naively probably got into this space thinking I could make a difference in the world as an independent agent or as an agent working in the space, one person at a time. And through lots of trial and error, lots of mistakes and lots of good fortune, I'm blessed to be in a spot now in my life and in my career where I have the opportunity to actually inspire change at a greater level by introducing a product that allows people to have different options, right, than maybe what they've been boxed into. No, go on.
Well, this is interesting because when I think about you, what's unique about you is your career has spanned just every role in insurance. You've been a licensed agent, you've been an agency owner, you've been a lead generator, you've even worked on the network lead management side of things. You've held some very important positions with a lot of responsibility. The CRO at Quote, you saw everything from sales to, to client interactions. You have what a lot of people don't have, which is a 360-degree experience of all sides of the business. And I'm curious, through all of that, what insights have you gained about what clients truly need?
That's a great question. I think if you look at it from what I should say is you can't just look at that question through one lens. There are a lot of different clients in our space, right? And if you look at what a lead generator needs as a client, right? Because I've consulted for those guys, I've been those guys. They're looking at it through a very different perspective than a carrier is looking at it as. It's a different perspective of lens that you're looking at, as AmeriLife and as one of the largest FMOs in our country, which is different than an independent agent or an agency. The core value that I constantly lean on, whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, is just blunt honesty and blunt truth, at least from my perspective. Just because it's my truth, this was the hardest lesson I think for me. Just because it's my truth doesn't necessarily mean that it's the correct answer, right? But I think that when you come from a place of just honest emotion and honest thought, it leads to success. So, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to just on that point. I have a working theory, and that is, as an agent working directly with customers early on, that's influenced your approach to ethical marketing and doing right by the customer, and even how you lead teams now. I think there's a direct correlation between that client-facing experience at the beginning of your career and now how you manage things at an executive level.
I'm definitely not your traditional executive, that's for sure, if that's what you're trying to say. But I do. I take a different approach, and I do it with intention, right? When I started out in this space, just 30,000 foot view of like how things have changed, right? And maybe not even for the better. When I started out, we did something called a needs assessment with our clients, right? The sale took 30 some odd minutes to make when you were selling even traditional U65 plans, because you got to know your customer. Some calls were less, right? Sometimes people call it in credit card in hand. I just need something, sign me up. And it was like, all right, whatever. But that was rarer. Like that's the exception, not the rule, right?
Absolutely.
And when I started out in the game, you talked to people, you got to know them, you built trust because it was your book, and your book was everything, right? They say your network is your net worth. That holds true entirely within the insurance world. I mean, your book of business is everything. And so, you go through, you ask a consumer, tell me about your life, man. Like, do you go to the doctor regularly? What kind of medications are you taking? What type of specialist care do you require on a regular basis? Have you had any major surgeries in the past few years? What major illnesses have you gone through? Do you have any fears about anything? Are there hereditary illnesses in your family that you want to be aware of may come down the road and be covered for that? Do you want to pay more now and less if you get sick, or less now and more if you get sick because you're healthy? And blending that all into, okay, I'm the expert, I'm the licensed guy, I'm the one with all the carriers, and I know what products are out there. I'm now going to take the information you gave me and try to help walk you through the path of what's best for you and for your family, if that's the case. And nowadays,
I've learned, and I just want to key off of that point. One thing that I've learned is that title of agent is a very important, very meaningful title. It means you're acting on behalf of that person and not yourself. When we talk about agents in other industries, you're talking about, sports agents, for example. You're in there to make the best deal for your client, not for yourself. When you were an agent, you were in there to take care of those needs that you identified very carefully at the beginning of the process, and to make the best decision for that beneficiary, regardless of the outcome that you would receive.
Yeah, and I was only an agent for a very short period of time too, right? Like I wasn't doing that for years and years, because my whole drive was I want to make big impact, right? I want to make big impact. And as a solo agent, you're kind of limited to the conversations that you have. So like I quickly pivoted into marketing, and then I quickly pivoted into, aggregation and building my own funnels, but leveraging other people's funnels and pulling together, massive marketing enterprises to the tune of, 9 figures of revenue a year. But at the end of the day, it all boiled back to that same genuine concern of, are we doing what's best for me as a marketer, me for my marketing partners, me for my agency buyers or my clients that are buying these leads and calls? And then above all else, are these guys doing things in an ethical manner for these customers? Or are we sending good leads and good calls in so that they can sell, a limited benefits plan or a defined benefits plan and sell it to them as, gold tier Humana plan or something like that? And, I implored my team, I really forced them ad nauseum to listen to hundreds of calls a day and thousands of calls on a monthly basis to ensure that the practices that we wanted to align with followed from the beginning of the funnel to the end of the funnel. And that does go back to what you're pointing out, right? Where you build that base up as you're dealing with consumers. My mindset was always, if my grandmother was still alive and going through this funnel and having this conversation with somebody, would I listen to that and be happy with what happened? And if the answer was no, we changed it.
No, that's an important perspective to have. Now, you mentioned something that you and I have discussed before, which is you started off in this business as an agent, but really in your heart, you always wanted to do something big. So speaking of big things, you're also a board member of the Insurance Marketing Coalition. Now, as we both know, IMC is the champion of ethical and legal marketing practices in the industry. Why was it important for you individually to take on that role? And secondarily, what are some of the biggest issues in the insurance marketing space that we still face?
So why was it important for me to take on that role? Mark Siggers was the one that contacted me originally about joining. We were having conversations about his tech stack that he had built out for lead qualification, and in conversation he was like, "Man, you really care about this stuff, don't you?" And I was like, "Absolutely. It's critically important to me." And so he asked me to join. We were, a small ragtag group, right? I've told this story before. It was literally 12 of us. You were there already.
Yep.
There was like 12 of us on a weekly call. I think we used somebody's business's Zoom just to like get enough people in and not get cut off at 40 minutes. And as it progressed, it was like, it started with all of us just kind of bemoaning what was happening to us, but also grateful that like finally something was happening in regards to removing some of this fraud and holding people accountable. But holy cow, like, do we have to take the sledgehammer approach? Is there a way to do this with a scalpel and trying to sort through that? So as we grew, the IMC really helped me kind of find my place on the compliance side. Previous to that, I mean, I hate to reduce it down to this core level, but like before compliance became a hot topic in the industry, it was still important to me. It was something that I based it on, but sometimes it came across to me like it was coming across to my clients like it was just a sales pitch. You know what I mean? Like It came across like, oh, this is just the bell and whistle on what he's trying to sell. And the more they get to know me, obviously they realize it resonates all the way through, and that's why we were so successful. But the IMC, I felt like, really was the first time that there was a collective voice in our industry that was willing to say what needed to be said, right? And that goes back to what you're talking about with my leadership style, and what goes back to with how I lead teams too is, as I've aged into this, I've been in this industry now for half my life. And it took a long time to kind of find my voice and where I wanted to be. And I really struggled. I really struggled emotionally, mentally, and career-wise to kind of wrangle in that blend of being always authentically yourself and always trying to be a voice of reason and standing even in the face of revenue. And when you're a chief revenue leader, or when you're a sales leader, when you're a revenue leader, when you are saying things that contradict the model of scaling revenue rapidly and quickly by narrowly focusing on, we will grow the right way, it's friction, right? And I face that a lot. And IMC really allowed me to have voice, and I'm grateful to that team for giving me the opportunity to do that. And not only did it add that backing, but it gave validation that there's a lot of other people who think the same way that I do. There's a lot of other people out there who feel that same model of concern for business, but also the people of our country and the customers, right? Insurance is a massive business. It's a really small industry. If you think about it, like the amount of people that actually make decisions in our industry, it's a very tight-knit community, but it's a huge business.
That's
servicing hundreds of millions of people. And so the decisions that we make as this small group impact hundreds of millions of people. Those decisions better be rooted in a good and positive framework, or we're impacting the lives of hundreds of millions of people in a confusing and possibly detrimental way.
So the second part of that question, and by the way, I agree 100% with everything you've just said. And I remember those first days of the IMC. We called those our book club days, and we said that we were going to adopt a crawl, walk, run type of approach. And I think we went right from birth into at least a jog, if not a sprint, with some of the work that we've done together. What's next, though? The second part of the question I asked, what is out there now that we need to attack as an industry that bothers you and takes away from the experience of those hundreds of millions of Americans who are relying on insurance agents and insurance agencies to help them make the decisions that are best for them?
I want to be purposeful in how I answer this. I don't want there to be any deconstruction of what I may mean and not mean. There are still hundreds of thousands of people daily coming through lead funnels that are off-base, misleading, downright fraudulent. There are still tens of thousands of people who are sold policies every single day under a misconception, largely due to pressure, because these agents are put under pressure to meet certain CPA requirements within the four walls of the room that they work in. That doesn't mean CPA restrictions are a bad thing, right? Like, you should be good at your job. If you're going to do something for a living, you should try to be good at it. And if you're not good and it doesn't make business sense, then that business needs to move on, and you should probably move into a role that's more suited for your skill set.
Mm-hmm.
But when you take that blanket approach and it's, okay, well, we have an operating budget as an agency or as a large group, and we're spending X amount of dollars per lead. Say a group wants to be at a $500 CPA and they're buying $50 leads, right? You better close 1 out of 10 or you're not meeting the mark of that business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens when all of those calls are coming in and it's people looking for $0 policies or flex card this or food card that, or whatever crazy advertising is going on? If you're an agent that is trying to sell an ethical policy, those flex cards, those food cards, these $0 accounts, they fit a very small group of our country. It's like, less than 5% of the people that call in actually qualify for all this. they really, it doesn't fit. Those policies don't fit everyone. They actually fit very few people. So the agent then is stuck in this paradox of, how do I sell a policy that doesn't match what this caller is calling in for? And also keep my job, because I have to feed myself, I have to feed my family. So they fall into this box of maybe not aligning all the benefits together. That's one half of the problem. The other half of the problem is that these ads still exist.
That's right.
And listen, this is everyone. Everyone out there is like, we don't want these fraudulent ads because it raises everybody else's marketing costs up. You can't build an honest and ethical ad while somebody else is running flex card, food card, $0 nationwide, because what is the consumer going to click? Are they going to click your ad, hey, talk to us today about insurance and we promise we're ethical? Or get insurance for no money down, get insurance for $0, no cost to you, get money back from your Social Security, get money, for food, get money for travel, blah, blah, blah. Of course they're going to click that ad.
Of course.
Anybody would, right? So everyone says we're sick of this, and yet everyone continues to buy calls and leads from the ads that are generated like this, because they've become so dependent on those media types over the last, however many years that they've been running.
So Chris, what's the
answer? An easy problem to fix.
Well, it's not an easy problem to fix. And I'm not asking you to fix it here, but in your opinion, with your experience, is it self-regulation of the industry, us just getting better together and using organizations like IMC to enforce standards and to call out those people that are doing it incorrectly? Or is it increased regulation? Does the government, because we're talking about government-sponsored programs here, does the government need to step in and say, you absolutely cannot do this and there will be consequences if you do it? What's the path forward to root out those problems that you've just described?
Anyone with a stake in this industry and anyone with a brain would say that we want to be a self-regulated business model. The problem is that we've been self-regulated largely, right, with guidelines, and it's devolved into this. So what happens then is you start seeing these crazy legislations coming down on us, and CMS just laying the banhammer down left and right. And I don't blame them, right? Like, I don't blame them for taking these drastic steps. I don't blame the FCC for taking these drastic steps. I don't blame the FTC for the recent release talking about TPMOs, right? Like, there's so many warnings that come down the pike that are just largely like, oh, I see it, but I'm going to ignore it. And we're just going to keep doing what we do. And then changes come. And now you're forced. And everybody has to be hyper reactive to these changes. It's, I know this sounds so naive to say, but like greed is a real problem in our world, man. Like, you know, you and I are both pretty religiously grounded, and greed is a real sin, man, and is a real problem in our world. And it's not, you know, what you're asking me is how do you cure greed, right? I don't have a good answer for that, man. I don't. And you know, people are going to chase what they're going to chase.
Yeah, I will say this, and you're absolutely right. By the way, we're recording this on Good Friday, so we have a wonderful Easter weekend to look forward to. And I know you and I are both looking forward to spending that with our families. Yeah, in terms of what you've just said, I think that this is where IMC and similar organizations can really help, not just by publishing documents or putting forward policy proposals, or, you know, intervening when we think that regulation goes too far, but there's a certain amount of peer pressure within our organizations to not be one of those bad actors. We do hold ourselves accountable. And you talked about, you know, the religious underpinnings that you and I have. I mean, it's kind of like going to a Bible study, right? You want to act, you want to do the right thing because you want to do the right thing, but you also don't want to get called out by somebody else at that Bible study who just saw what you did last night when you should have been home with your family, right? So there's these organizations do, I think, help keep people on the straight and narrow, because you certainly don't want to be like us in a position of leadership or have a member of the organization be found to be doing something outside the boundaries of what we all consider to be ethical. And just speaking frankly, the IMC has had some cases where some of our participants have been caught doing some things that are substantially similar to what you've described, and we've asked them to no longer be a part of the organization as a result of that.
It's and look, man, I'm not sitting here saying I'm some like perfect angel. I do plenty wrong. I learned the hard way when I was much younger, which is why I have such a hard stance on this now in my formidable years, my transformative years, whatever you want to call it, right? I just turned 40, and it's like a weird thing for me still, so you know, bear with me on that.
Wait till you get
I turned 42 years ago, and it's still bothering me, so give me a break. But the reality is, I think that there are really good groups in our business. I don't want this to come across as like, oh my gosh, the insurance industry is so, it's not. It's an impactful subset, but it is still a subset. And I do believe that the majority of the people in our industry try as hard as they can to do the right thing. I think it's gotten better. I would say that, you know, that small section was a much bigger voice a few years back when it was kind of, you know, the Wild West of what was going on here with the growth. But, you know, there's something to be said about the phrase, right? Those who can should.
Very good. Yeah.
That's what makes communities great. That's what makes great leaders great, is the people who can should. And so and that's what I go back to with the IMC really helping me kind of find my voices, because I felt sometimes like a lot of the time I was kind of the only one being like, hey guys, this is pretty messed up. Like, let's raise our hands here and like, is this what we want to be doing? Right? Like, we all have children, and like, yeah, hey kids, the reason why we're able to go to Disney this week is because I was able to confuse a bunch of senior citizens into thinking they were going to get flex cards when they couldn't, right? Like, that's what paid for our Disney trip. Like, I can't do that. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm weird, but you know, there are a good constitution of people who do toe it in line. But even still, it's enough of a problem that these government regulating bodies continue to leverage their power by making jackhammer changes that then impact even the guys that are trying to play by the rules too. And I think that's where the IMC helps find balance, right? So
on that point, that's something else that I picked up as I was, you know, looking a little bit into the preparation for this talk. You've been very vocal online about some of the upheaval that agents and agencies and carriers have to deal with in ACA and Medicare Advantage. One of your recent posts said, you know, rising costs, lower agent commissions, and tighter regulations are giving what we're all experiencing as a perfect storm of uncertainty, and could lead to major fallout in the coming year. So you've described very well some of the marketing practices that we'd like to rein in, and the IMC is now helping to govern, and we've all come together in that group to celebrate and to promote responsible marketing, but that doesn't undo the uncertainty that we're seeing overall in the business. So, looking at this perhaps from a 50,000 foot view, what should agents and consumers do now to prepare for the changes and to navigate this upheaval that you're seeing in the industry?
They should cut off every other product that they sell and only sell mine. No, no, I'm just kidding.
And we're going to talk about your product here in just a minute.
Yeah, no, that's the greatest and worst plug of all time right there. Be prepared, right? Understand what's going on. I read a stat a couple of days ago that absolutely blew my mind. Is like 60% of the United States reads at a 6th grade level or below.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
That is not ideal. That is not going to lead to future success.
No.
So getting people to understand is a real challenge, right? It is a significant challenge. So that's why these easier, kind of simple $0 ads work so well, because they're, oh, it's $0. It's online. It must be true. Click, right? Here I go down my funnel. People need to understand the options that are available to them. Medicare Advantage is an awesome program. Medicare Advantage was invented, by the way, to save our country money, because like the Medigap and traditional Medicare costs were getting out of control. The government couldn't manage it anymore. And so, however many years ago it was, like, we're going to roll out Medicare Advantage plans where the government is going to subsidize the carriers for adding certain benefits to certain programs for our seniors, which is great in theory. And I'm going to loosely paraphrase a lot of this because I understand it. I'm not an expert on all of this. So if I'm wrong, in the comments, just be gracious to me. It's Good Friday after all. Here's kind of my synopsis of what happened. It got too expensive. It got too clunky. It got too weird for the government to continue to manage. So they linked up with the right people. They linked up with the carriers, right? And said, hey, can you help us roll out these plans and we'll help subsidize and cover some of your costs? And the carriers, of course, are like, say that again louder, please. What? Yes. And you're going to pay us to do this. And so there you go. But it worked. It worked in this harmonious balance because there was still enough providers out there to take care of people so people could see their doctors quick enough. There was good plans out there. And then it just became like this star rating chase almost, right? Where you got to get 5 stars, otherwise your plan is nothing. And so crazy benefits are coming through: food cards, flex cards, travel benefits, country club benefits. There's country club benefits out there, right? I don't know too many people on Medicare Advantage plans that are like, going out there and golfing regularly, right? But they exist. These benefits exist. And so we're getting, they're getting subsidized from the government. They're getting subsidized from the government. And the way that they get properly subsidized is by these members, these people with the insurance plan, right? We'll call them the beneficiaries, going to the doctor sends the coverage codes back, the carriers then send it to, CMS to get their proper money in, because there's a staple. If you come in and, if I join a Med Advantage plan and no one's got any details on me and my medical history, I'm using raw numbers here. These aren't real, right? Uncle Sam gives carrier $500 a month to cover my care. Well, what happens if I have, diabetes, stage 3 cancer, cataracts, liver failure, kidney disease, to care for me is like $25,000, $30,000 a month
minimum.
So again, I'm just using like silly numbers here. So the carrier is like, this is not working for me. They need me to go to my doctor so that I could get the proper diagnosis codes. And again, I'm not the expert here, so I'm sure I'm missing steps in this funnel, but bear with me. The carrier then, sends those coverage codes to CMS. CMS reimburses them the proper amount. And that funnel used to work well enough where the carriers were able to scale, grow, remain profitable, and continue to do what they're doing. Then COVID comes along. Then policies continue to constrict their coverage areas and territories, which means less providers per territory of coverage, which means me and now 50,000 other people are going to the same doctors instead of me and 5,000 other people are going to the same doctors. And so it takes me months to get in to see my provider. And so the carrier is sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Meanwhile, they have to cover me because it's a guaranteed benefit program. And so they continue to pay for me. So their margins continue to shrink. When I finally see the doctor, I'm halfway through my 1-year policy and they already have to think about re-signing me on for the next year. But now a new carrier's come into the territory with 2 extra benefits, so I, the beneficiary, flip to that plan. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
And so
the
margins, the margins just continue to shrink and continue to shrink and continue to shrink. And now it's hit this point of volatility where before season last year, you saw plans closing up shop left and right. I mean, there are entire cities without major coverage because of these changes that have come down. You also see compensation changes. There were several carriers in the middle of season last year that changed commission rates on Medicare plans and on PDP plans in terms of compensation to the agents, even though these agents were actively selling these plans, due to the fact that it was like, if we continue to pay for this, we're going out of business, and then nobody's getting covered anyway. But that is obviously a dramatic shift of what it has been, and it creates a lot of pain points for everyone in the funnel, right? So that was a kind of a long-winded answer, but it just affects everybody. It
was a very comprehensive answer, and it actually leads me to my next question, which is, there are alternatives. You've built an alternative. Caryn Health is doing something that I've heard characterized as an ACA alternative, an under 65 product. I won't do it justice, but I would love to hear from you how you're approaching this problem, not just complaining about it, but actually you and your team solving for it in large part.
Listen, I'm really good at complaining. Just ask anybody who works with me on a regular basis. So if we want to do another hour of me, the C. Michelson complain fest, we could do it. But no, there's inevitably going to be change for a lot of reasons, right? Everything we just talked about, everything that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, regulatory changes. But in ACA in particular, you're already seeing carriers make changes. It's the same carriers that cover for Medicare Advantage too, right? And if you loosely look at it, ACA is like the U65 Medicare Advantage almost, right? I know that's not like one-to-one, but it's pretty close. A lot of benefits, a lot of subsidies, free insurance, et cetera, right? For a lot of people. Well, believe it or not, and it's actually surprising me how many people don't realize this, there have always been subsidies for the ACA. Like since it came out, you always got a reduced cost if you fell to a certain level of the federal poverty line, right? And then a few years back, the Inflation Reduction Act came in, and it expanded the guaranteed subsidies across that 400% to actual poverty line, giving people basically above like the 150 to 200% poverty line, all the way to 400, better subsidies. Well, the Inflation Reduction Act changes into the subsidies are scheduled to end at the end of this year. And I am not the only one that thinks the way that I think on this. And I know that there's a large constitution of people who disagree with me, right? So I want to be cognizant of that. I don't know the future, right? As much as I would love to have the great Kreskin ball in my hand and make that designation. But in my opinion, the signs are pointing to the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, ending, those stipulations ending at the end of this year, and the system going back to what the original subsidies were. And although the original subsidies are helpful to a lot of people in our country, there's going to be a large group that fall within that like 200 to 400% where their subsidies are going to significantly change and their prices are going to go up. And as the closer you get to that 400 line, the more drastic the changes are going to be, because that's just the way that it's kind of tiered, right? Or I should say tiered like that, right? Because the lower you are, the more you get, the higher you are, the less you get.
Sure.
Which theoretically is how it should work. So we saw the changes coming with Medicare. We know that there's a lot of the same problems in ACA as there are in Medicare Advantage plans, and it's the same carriers, so they're going to learn from prior pain points, because why wouldn't they? And so there's going to be shifts. There's going to be shifts likely in compensation. There's going to be shifts in coverage territories. There's going to be shifts in benefits available. And so we built a plan to kind of fill the gap there, right? The ACA did really great things, and it also did some pretty dramatic things that I wouldn't say are good. What did ACA do that was great, right? I'm a visual guy, so I got to use my hands. I'm sorry. This is just how I am as a person.
Use the whole screen.
The ACA allowed a lot of people who could never afford coverage, especially not good coverage. It allowed them to get great coverage, and it made it so they can't get denied when they've got some real problems going on, which is super important. It should be the way, right? That should be the way.
Yes.
But by doing that, you then forced an entire other group to pay 4 to 5 times more than they used to for their insurance in order to cover for that. Okay. Mm-hmm. Also, slide that over. It also greatly consolidated the amount of networks and provider coverage for each one of those products that are out there. So now you have, again, that example of there used to be 5,000 people in this provider network. There's now 50,000 people in this provider network. And I may be misconstruing terms and whatnot, but just what I'm saying is not incorrect. And people are waiting months to see their PCP. People are waiting months to see specialists or get MRIs or get x-rays. It's what you see a lot in Canada too, right? You see, if you search online anywhere, you could find thousands of videos of people who cross from Canada into the United States to get imaging done, to get x-rays done, to get, specialist care because they have to wait so long to see their specialist. I saw a video 2 weeks ago. It actually is like, one of these reels on Instagram actually made me cry. It's a woman who, because I'm really sensitive still about the cancer stuff. And this woman has a brain tumor, like they know that she has a brain tumor. And she was diagnosed in like November of 2024. And her specialist, the MRI and biopsy in her brain, because they have to do it together, is scheduled for February of 2026.
I grew up in Michigan, and so I saw a lot of this firsthand, even 20, 30 years ago. There was kind of this two-way transaction across the border. There were Canadians who were looking to expedite their medical care for a charge, coming across the border to the hospitals that we had in Michigan in order to get those treatments. And then there were lower income individuals in Michigan who would go across the border to Canada to get subsidized drugs. It was as if we could somehow combine the best of both systems, which probably isn't fiscally feasible, you'd have a really good outcome. But in fact, not a lot of people talk about this. Where I was, Detroit and its sister city across in Canada, Windsor, there is a thriving trade in the medical industry between those two cities because some things are just unavailable in Canada that are readily available if you're self-pay in the United States. And there's some things that are terrifically expensive in the United States that have price regulations across or price controls over the border. And so you saw a ton of traffic happening because of that.
And if you ask Trump, he just wants to make Canada the 51st state to blend together, right? That'll makes perfect sense. Maybe not.
I'll be getting my next MRI in Greenland, apparently.
Can you imagine what a flight that would be? The whole time you're thinking about what's going on, and now you got to fly to Greenland. So anyway, all these fluctuations in ACA, some good, some not so good. What it definitely did, though, is it created gaps in coverage. And what I mean by that is like short-term medical is gone, basically. Like it's available still in a few states, but the regulations around it have changed. So it's a shell of what it used to be. The mini meds, limited meds, the defined benefits, whatever you want to call it, are super difficult to sell anymore because why not just sign on? If you had a life-changing event, for short-term medical and for these defined benefit plans and catastrophic coverage plans, you typically only got those when you were in between jobs, right? But you qualify for a plan if you have a life-changing event. So why would you go that route when you could do it others? Well, the reason is because if you make at or above that 400% poverty line, the cost of coverage is insane. Like to cover me and my kids on insurance costs more than my mortgage. And I have a pretty decent house. You know what I mean? Like I'm not living in a shanty by the river. Or was it a van down by the river, like Chris Farley, right? Like
a van down by the
river. It's the costs are insane. And so, we built a plan to fill that gap. Not every state has those tax limitations anymore, where if you don't have a marketplace plan, now I'm taxing you thousands of dollars or whatever it was. So we built a plan. We built a plan that's,
how many states are you in?
39.
Wow.
And really the only impactful states that we're not in, if you're talking about like insurance and selling insurance, is like Illinois and Pennsylvania and Connecticut. And so, we're not in like Alaska and Hawaii, they're in the Dakotas for the most part, but those are less impact states when you're selling. Let's just call a spade a spade.
And it's modeled on the health share ministry approach, if I've got that correct, right?
It is. So the way that it works with the marketplaces now and with the Department of Insurances is if you build a product, you have a lot of limitations, man. Like you have to cover everyone. You have to allow everyone in, regardless of age, weight, health, whatever, right? And again, I give a lot of credit to the carriers. I give a lot of credit to our government for building that out. That is needed. There are people who need coverage and deserve coverage. That's not a bad thing. But it's too different, man. And the amount that an average American family is paying for coverage just because they make a reasonable amount of money in this life is astronomically unfair. And so we built a plan to cover the gaps. We're 90% of traditional U65 coverage that you'll find in a marketplace for a third of the cost.
Wow.
You can get good coverage. You could get really good coverage with a major provider network backing it for a family of 4 people for as low as like $425 a month.
Amazing.
Or you could get a great plan with like $1,000 out of pocket and $5,000 of max. I'm sorry, $1,000. Let's call it NSA, or a $5,000 like max out of pocket, max sharing amount, to $575, $600 a month. You can't even come close to finding a plan like that in the marketplace. And I have to be careful here because I need to make the disclosure that we are not an insurance plan. And so the insurance terms that I'm using are in no way reflective of like what our plan does. It's not a deductible. It's not a max out of pocket. It is a healthcare agreement between us as a provider and you as a consumer, that if you pay this amount of money every month and you have been truthful and honest about your pre-existing conditions, you are going to get great coverage when you go to your doctor and need help from a medical professional, right? That is, and at the core, that's what insurance should be. And it's not always that way nowadays.
So there's some questions that people naturally ask when we talk about programs like this. So it's new to the market, but it's not new. You've been operating this product for several years and you've got actuarial results that give you confidence that this is going to work, right?
Oh, yeah. So when the plan rolled out, it was the actuaries, they give you numbers. And if you do this and you sign on these types of people, this should happen, right? And the people on my board, I'll remit their name from the recording, but these are legacy guys in the space. These are guys who served on in the House of Representatives. These are people who have built billion-dollar businesses in the insurance space. These are people who consulted and worked with guys like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and
names we would recognize.
Names you would absolutely recognize. Guys that Anyway, number one rule: do not build something that is going to embarrass me or tarnish my name in any way. Number one rule, before anything else. Number two is make sure that because of rule number one, everything else falls in line. People get covered based on what we tell them that they're going to get covered. Keep it affordable. Most businesses are built to, make a quick buck or make, money right away. Their move was, let's disrupt this industry and see where it takes us, right? And so I think that's a different model. It's let's build something that is really needed and see if the country is ready for it and actually wants it. And so far, what we've heard is that this is something that people want. It is a health sharing ministry. We just approach it in a bit of a different way than traditional groups do. We've aligned with one of the big 4 accounting firms. They have built us a vault where a certain amount of every sharing dollar that comes into us goes into this vault. We can't touch it. The only people that have access to that money is that big accounting firm and our TPA. And that money is specifically there to pay claims and cover people for when they get ill and need to use the money, right? We have gone out and we have gone above and beyond to ensure that people get the right type of coverage. As we rolled this out, we realized that we were actually able to reduce the amount of money, that consumers pay in based on the results that we got back. The actuarials were actually wrong on that. So we've reduced costs over time. They're stable now where they are at, and we feel good about where they're at. Things always change. Medical coverage continues to go up, so we have to keep a mindful watch of that. But the last time we made that change a few years back, we were able to reduce costs. So, again, it goes back to, I am not, a United, a Humana, a Aetna. I have so much respect for those guys. They build these super comprehensive and robust plans that cover everyone. You have to fit into our box of what we will cover. But because of that, we are able to offer a reduced price to the consumer. We are able to offer basically traditional coverage for, like I said, less than half the cost. But you can't have major pre-existing conditions. You can't have serious major illnesses. If you're at the doctor on a weekly basis for whatever reason, or you're taking a ton of medication, right? We're not going to be the right plan for you. I'm a great fit for about 15% of the country. And that's all I want to be. But I want to be the best product for that 15%. And we're constantly making moves to improve the coverage opportunities, to improve the depth of what our product covers. We offer a great a prescription plan, with a ton of $0 generics across, almost every generic is $0 at this point. There's Teladoc. You can see a PCP through the Teladoc system. You can get mental health benefits associated with it. There's some physical therapy coverage in there as well. We try to go as deep as we can in terms of that product coverage. And the reason why, go ahead. The reason why is to fill the gap, right? That average American family that's healthy, that makes 80, 90 grand a year. If they go into the marketplace, they're going to pay $1,800 to $2,500 a month. $1,800 is a terrible plan, right? It is bad coverage, and you're paying an absurd. They come to me, and it's $500 a month. It's this makes sense. It's kind of back to how it used to be 2008 to 2011, basically. Well, at least when I was in the game on that side.
Well, you made a joke earlier where you said we need another hour for, to hear Chris Michelson's complaints. But I want to make a point here to the audience who's listening that, we may joke about Chris complaining, but what you're seeing here is Chris identifying a gap in the market, identifying the reasons for it, and not complaining, but rather creating a solution. And obviously, this is something that, caught my eye as a professional in this space. It's caught the eye of a lot of people in this space. And obviously, Chris is tagged in this post. So if you have questions about that, you can reach out to him. I want to ask you one last question about this particular product when it comes to the sales side. Commissions wise, is this something that an agent can build their business on?
Yeah, absolutely. It's somewhat it's somewhat passe to talk specific numbers, right? Which I'm learning as a carrier, but think about it like this. Commissions continue to go down in Medicare and in ACA because of all the reasons that we outlined before, right? Our commissions continue to go up to incredible levels, right? Double digit numbers and well into the double digits. There's no enrollment period, right? I'm not an insurance product, so I don't have to fall into those requirements of open enrollment periods. You could sign on at any time. There's no re-enrollment process. There's no step down in commission. And people like the product. Our product is good. So when people stay on, they're staying on for years. We've had this product out in the marketplace for 3.5 years now. Our average persistency is well into mid 20s in terms of months, 22 to 24 months is our average persistency. Meaning somebody buys and they stay on for almost 2 years straight on average. We've only been around for 3.5 years. Now there's a bunch of drop off in the first 30 days because there's sometimes confusion between insurance, not insurance, and we're doing a better job now of understanding that and building the membership team to do membership welcome calls. But that's the average persistency. What that means for an agent is when you sell a Medicare Advantage plan, you're selling a Medicare Advantage plan to that consumer every year. When you sign someone on to an ACA plan, you're selling that consumer on an ACA plan every year. And you're losing a certain percentage of your book. You sign on 10 guys, you're losing 2 or 3. And honestly, the difference between losing 2 or 4 is like spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on a team specifically to follow up with your book in order to make sure that they're going to stay with you next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so the difference between keeping 6 or keeping 8 people on costs so much that the margin that you actually yield from keeping those extra 2 people is so much smaller than the rest of your book. And it just becomes hard. The average ACA room is only making, whatever, call it 380 to 430, 440 a year on selling an ACA plan, maybe more with bonuses and whatnot. The average LTV of a Medicare plan 5-6 years ago used to be into the thousands of dollars, right? It
Right.
used to be huge. Now a lot of public companies show their numbers. You see it dropping down to like $600, $700 LTV.
Right.
So if your CPA is $400, $500, there's very, very little margin.
Yeah, those
Our
LTV ratios are shrinking.
It's awful. So it's very difficult to run, and that goes back to the misleading ads. They're trying to cut costs because the markets are changing. I understand why the evil exists, right? Like, I understand why it's there. I'm so grateful that there's more and more people aligning to try to figure out how to resolve that problem. Our LTVs are into the thousands, like $2,500-ish LTV when you sign someone onto our policy. So for an agency owner and for an agent, that's super attractive. But the reality is you have to understand that we are a good fit for 15% of your people you talk to on a regular basis. If you sell us at 10% clip, right? You take your current ACA business and you make my product 10% of that book, you will lift your revenue line by almost 40%. Those are real numbers that exist that I can show and prove over and over again. But you got to go back to the way we used to sell. There has to be a needs assessment done. You got to get to know, we're coming full circle from the beginning of the conversation.
We are.
You have to get to know your customer a little bit and see who fits in. So.
And if you find that person in that 15%, you can offer this to them. It's a win for them, and it's a win for the agent. I want to shift in the time we have remaining to something a little more personal. So I would be remiss if I didn't congratulate you on reaching 12 years cancer-free. And what's an additional piece of good news about this anniversary is that you were able to celebrate it earlier this month at Medicarians. You were surrounded by your friends, by your colleagues. I'm going to insert a picture at the end of this podcast of Chris and myself and my wife at Medicarians celebrating that. That was a wonderful night. How has it changed your outlook on life when you going through that journey? How has that transformed you?
How much time do we have left?
Well, let me contextualize it this way. Let me put a finer point on it to help you answer that question, because I know that's a big question. I'm looking now at your LinkedIn post about the anniversary. You shared how sitting in a hospital gown during treatment, wondering if you'd live long enough to walk your daughter down the aisle. It made quarterly earnings reports and deal negotiations suddenly feel not so important. What you wrote here instead is what truly matters: people, love, faith, and purpose. Talk about those 4 things: people, love, faith, and purpose, and how your battle with cancer, your win over cancer, has influenced each of those 4 things.
You can see it still impacts me as my eyes turn red and swell. I want to think about how to say this the right way. I used to look at life and business the wrong way, like fully. And what I mean by that is I always looked at the outcome. I always was focused on the outcome of what was going to happen and completely missed the journey. I have, to get to where I've gotten to, people see, and I'm not like some wildly successful guy. I've done pretty damn well for myself, especially considering my background, right? But I'm not talking about like, I'm not going out to my Rolls Royce and going to the house in the Hamptons or anything, you know what I mean? But it's like, I do well for myself, but everything was like money motivated, man. And everything was, I had to be the best. I had to always be right. So my wife would probably argue I still always have to be right. But but the reality is like you miss so much that happens in front of you. Like I've missed birthdays, I've missed weddings, I've missed funerals, I've missed my own birthdays. And so needlessly, like looking back on it, I missed my best friend growing up, and this is such a shit thing to do that still wanes on me, and it breaks my heart. Like my best friend growing up, his father passed away, and I was on a flight to a sales meeting at the time that I got that letter, and chose to stay the 2 days through the sales meeting and sales conference and rollout, versus now what I would have done is land, go see them face to face so they could see the seriousness in my face and in my voice and explain the situation and reschedule. But I was so focused on that goal. It was something I had been chasing. It was so close. It was the most important thing. And it's something that I live with that I'll never forgive myself for. So was it worth it at the end of the day? Absolutely not. And I don't ever do that anymore. How has it changed me? I wish I could say that going through cancer was a strong enough motivator for me to find God, but I'd be lying. It took other things afterwards to kind of bring me to that, you seeing your children be born and just understanding that community. But the thing that I would say it impacted the most was, you have no idea what is going to happen to you the next day when you wake up. Bill, if I offered you $10 million right now, would you take it?
Well, I'd want to know what the obligation would be that I would have to get the.
Don't overthink it, right? Don't overthink it. No strings attached. If I had $10 million and I was like, Bill, do you want $10 million?
Yes, I would like $10 million.
Yeah. Now let's say I put a stipulation on it. Here's $10 million, but you don't get to wake up tomorrow. Are you taking the $10 million?
No, I am not.
Of course not. And nobody is. And that was my reality. It wasn't $10 million. I wish it was $10 million. But that was my reality. I woke up and it was like, shit, man, this thing is beatable. I knew it was beatable, and that's why I fought it so damn hard. But you have no idea what is going to take place in your life in the future. Every day gives you opportunities to fight your damnedest for what you believe in and what you want to accomplish, and try to be the best version of yourself. And sometimes fighting to be the best version of yourself means you just got up and sat at your computer that day, because we all go through things. We all have things that come up. And some days being your best is getting on the Lead Professor podcast and hopefully crushing it. And some days being your best is getting on stage in front of hundreds of people at Medicarians and preaching what it is that you care about, right? And some days being your best is just waking up and playing with your kids every day, all day. It's just, what it taught me is to embrace the journey and set goals for yourself, but make sure it aligns with the journey that you want to walk down during that path.
Well, now the audience knows now, Chris, why I love and adore you. And like I said at the outset, I knew this conversation was going to hit different. This is a man who's navigated storms in ACA marketing and Medicare marketing, but he's also navigated something far more personal. And he reminds me every day that the heart of this business isn't leads, it isn't margins, it's not even scale. It's people. And personally, if you want to get the same benefit that I've gotten by seeing a blueprint on how to lead with ethics, live with purpose, and still build something very meaningful, well, you've just heard one of the blueprints that I try to follow. So thank you very much, Chris. And thank you to our audience for listening. Until next time, I'd implore all of you, do good work and always, always do right by the people we serve. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, Bill. This has been awesome.